Value of biodiversity. Content of this lecture: introduction, consumptive use value, productive use value, social value, ethical and moral value, aesthetic value, and the last one is option value. So first we'll discuss what is the biodiversity. So biodiversity is the degree of variation of life forms within a given species, ecosystem, biomass, and planet. Biodiversity, short for biological diversity, it is the term used to describe the variety of life that is found on Earth and all the natural processes. This includes ecosystem, genetic and cultural diversity, and the connections between these and all other species. So, why should we give value to the biodiversity, or what is the value of biodiversity? Biodiversity provides a variety of environmental services from its species and ecosystems that are essential at global, regional, and local levels. The loss of biodiversity contributes to the climate change. The forest converts CO2 into carbon and oxygen. Loss of forest covers due to release of carbon dioxide and other gases due to industrialization, which contributes to greenhouse effect. Greenhouse leads to global warming, which results in rise in sea level, submerging the low-lying areas in the world and causing atmospheric changes. So, therefore, we should give value to biodiversity because almost all of our essential goods we receive or it is generated from the biodiversity or generated due to the biodiversity. Also, if we don't give value or if we don't value the biodiversity and we don't preserve the biodiversity, our action or loss of biodiversity is going to contribute towards change in climate. Once there is change in climate, each and every component on this earth, on this planet, will face a change. That change is expected to be a negative change, especially the impact on living beings, including humans. As we know that if there is loss of biodiversity, the forest area which converts CO2 into carbon and oxygen, the concentration of carbon is going to increase day by day. Additionally, loss of vegetation and forests due to several human activities like industrialization, urban growth is contributing towards greenhouse effect, and ultimately this greenhouse is leading towards global warming and increase in temperature, which results in each and every year there is a rise is observed in the sea level that leads towards submerging the low-lying areas in the world, and thus it is causing atmospheric changes. So biological diversity is also essential for preserving ecological processes. Tribal communities who directly gather resources from the forest or fishes folk who catch fish in marine or freshwater ecosystem are directly or indirectly linked to the biological variety present in the biosphere. For others, such agricultural communities, biodiversity is used to grow their crops, suiting the environment. Urban communities generally use the greatest amount of goods and services, which are all indirectly drawn from natural ecosystem. Preservation of biological resources is essential for the well-being and long-term survival of mankind. Seeing the present scenario of climate change and impact of climate change on all the natural phenomena, it is very well clear that preservation of natural resources is essential, especially not only for today but for long-term survival of mankind. Almost all the resources, natural resources, either land resource, water resource, forest resource, aquatic resource, all the available resources are manipulated due to overpopulation, overexploitation by human beings. And thus, day by day, the chances of extreme climatic activities are increasing. Also, now we are facing much frequent extreme events like floods, earthquakes, heavy rain, drought. So, we all are in the present scenario that we all are facing natural extremes. So, this is the time to think about value of biodiversity, to think about preservation of natural resources, to think about preserving the biological diversity in our surrounding, and to act towards conservation of the resources. Consumptive use value. A straightforward example is the direct utilization of timber, food, fuel, wood, and fodder by local communities. The biodiversity contained in the ecosystem provides forest dwellers with all their daily needs: food, building material, fodder, medicines, and a variety of other products. They are well known about the qualities and different uses of wood from different species of trees and collect a large number of local fruits, roots, and plant materials that they use as food or construction materials and even for medicines. Fisher folks are completely dependent on fish and know where and how to catch fish and other edible aquatic animals and plants. So, conjunctive use value should be considered among all the users or among all the stakeholders. Several examples can be seen regarding utilization of the resources. The commercial uses or utilizing the resources on a commercial scale has overexploited almost all the resources. We can take example of any activity which has been practiced since several decades, say like fishing or hunting or cultivation of crops, which was done traditionally. All those activities earlier was done simultaneously with the nature, in correspondence with the nature, according to the nature. Crops were cultivated, In their specific season, there was no off-season cultivation. Fishing was done on a very small scale, and the local people knew where to do fishing and where not to do. But once this commercialization or industrialization started, we can have an example. We can have not a single example, but several examples can be seen. Once on a large scale, when farming or crop cultivation started, we exploited our water resources. Even in India, several places are there where we are facing water shortage, water scarcity. We have overexploit and overutilized our land resource. Several places are there, several land resources are there which are day by day fertility level is decreasing, soil structure is depleting, erosion is on rapid rate. Similarly, if we talk about forest resource, much of the forest is being cut down for building and for development activities. An estimation of scientists, they say that as per total geographical area of India, nearly 33% of area should be covered by forest or vegetation, dense vegetation. But very sadly, it is the truth that hardly 12% of our land is covered with forest area. So we can simply understand that how when everything went on commercialization, everything went on industrialization, and currently we are talking about industrialized agriculture, we observe that each and every resource we have overexploited, and almost all the resources are up to the alarming line. Similar case is for aquatic resources. In the entire world, we have human beings have done fishing on a very large scale, on a commercial scale, and several varieties, species of fish or aquatic animals are now do not exist, or they are near to their existence. Similarly, over hunting, several species of animals are no more. We cannot find them nowadays. We cannot see them nowadays. So therefore, it is time to think about consumptive use value, to use all the resources wisely, so that a sustainable life or sustainability can be maintained. Productive use value. This category comprises of marketable goods. The biotechnologist uses biorich area to prospect and search for potential genetic properties in plants or animals that can be used to develop better varieties of crops. For the pharmacist, biological diversity is the raw material from which new drugs can be identified from plants or animal products. For industrialists, biodiversity is a rich storehouse to develop new products. For the agricultural scientists, the biodiversity is basis for developing the better crops. Genetic diversity enables scientists and farmers to selectively develop better crops and domestic animals through careful breeding programs. New crop varieties or cultivars are being developed using the genetic material found in wild relatives of crop plants through biotechnology. New species of plants and animals are being constantly discovered in the wild. These wild species are the building blocks for the betterment of human life, and their loss is a great economic loss to the entire mankind. So this is very important that the new species of plants and animals are being constantly discovered in the wild. These wild species are the building blocks for the betterment of human life, and their loss is great economic loss to the entire mankind. Thus, the preservation of biodiversity has now been essential for industrial growth and economic development, and this is called biological prospecting. Social use value. While traditional societies had valued and preserved their biodiversity and its resources, modern man has depleted it up to the extent leading to irrecoverable loss due to extinction of several species. Ecosystem people value the biodiversity as a part of their livelihood as well as through cultural and religious sentiment. Several examples can be seen, especially in the tribal people, their tradition, their religious belief, their cultural belief are somewhere surrounding the natural components, either a tree, a river, animal, or a season, sun, moon, stars. So their traditional belief, their cultural belief, and religious belief and sentiments are very friendly towards biodiversity and nature. It is time for all of the human beings or humankind to practice similar sentiments towards the preservation of biodiversity for our own survival, long term survival. A great variety of crops have been cultivated in traditional agricultural system which spread widely and marketed throughout and acted as insurance against the failure of one crop, today's monoculture. So we can see if we try to analyze the cropping calendar of any area, we don't see the practice of say like mixed farming, or very rarely we find farmers who are changing the crops every year for the sake of getting achieving more production, more economic benefit. Farmers choose only those varieties, high yielding species of crops, cash crops, and by continuous cultivating a single crop in the field, the fertility level of the field is depleting day by day. In recent years, farmers have begun to receive incentives to grow cash crops for national international markets rather than to supply local needs, which resulted in local food shortages. Additionally, unemployment gone high, landlessness gone up, also increased vulnerability to drought and floods. So, several new varieties or hybrid varieties of almost all the crops are available. Either it is vegetable crops, cereal crops, or pulses crops. For the sake of receiving more economic benefit, farmers are using hybrid varieties. But if we see the another side, these hybrid varieties are depleting the soil resources, land resources, quality of land, quality of soil, At the same time, these hybrid varieties are also impacting on human nature, human health through different disease, through different shortage of vitamins, lacking of vitamins by consuming hybrid food. Additionally, there are several uh, national and international organizations which pay incentives, a high rate of incentive to the farmers for growing crops of their own choice. So this on one side it is beneficial for the farmers, but also it has a negative side also. Like farmers stop cultivating the crops of local needs, so there is a local food shortage, unemployment is generated, landlessness is generated, also increased vulnerability to drought and floods. Ethical and moral values. Ethical values of biodiversity are based on the importance of protecting all form of life. Most religious and secular creeds believe that all form of life have the right to exist on earth. Man is only a small part of the earth. Earth's great family of species, plants and animals have an equal right to live and exist on our planet. There are several cultural, moral, and ethical values associated with the sanctity of all forms of life. Indian civilizations has over several generations preserved nature through local traditions. We have in our country a large number of sacred groves or diores preserved by tribal people in several states. These sacred groves around ancient sacred sites and temples act as gene bank for wild plants. Aesthetic values. The appreciation of the presence of biodiversity for its inherent value and beauty, as well as for the contribution it makes to our knowledge, our aesthetic imagination and creativity are some reasons to preserve it. Quite apart from killing wildlife for food, it is important as a tourist attraction also. Biodiversity is a beautiful and wonderful aspect of nature. When you sit in a forest and listen to the birds, how pleasant it is. Watch a spider weaving its complex web. Observe a fish feeding. It's just magnificent and fascinating. In India, particularly, our history and culture is replete with plant and animal image. Symbols from wild species such as the lion of Hinduism, the elephant of Buddhism, and the vehicles of several deities are animals that have been venerated for thousands of years. The sacred basil or the tulsi plant has grown in the country yard of each household for centuries. So, if we go back to our history, Indian history, we find there was a high aesthetic value among the citizens of this country towards nature, towards several natural components. Several examples can be seen in different religions. For example, several rivers of Indian rivers are considered as holy. Several plants are considered holy. Few birds, few insects, Few animals are considered sacred and thus they are preserved from several centuries. Plant of tulsi or basil is a very good example to understand because almost at every house, in front of every household, people have the tradition to plant tulsi from centuries, several years back. So these were the aesthetic values, and the main reason was not the religion, but the main reason was to preserve the natural resources. Option value: keeping future possibilities open for their use is called the option value. So option value is keeping future possibilities open for their use. It is very important to predict which of our species or traditional varieties of crops as well as domestic animals will be greatest used in the coming time or in future. To improve cultivars and domestic livestock, we need to return to wild relatives of crop, plants and animals. Nowadays, several scientists are suggesting to grow local, to cultivate local, to eat local, and to sell local. So, main reason is to preserve the biodiversity, to conserve the resources, to minimize the overexploitation, to maintain employment in the local area, to maintain the communal harmony, to bridge the gap between poor and rich. This can be a very good example, or this can be a very good practice, which should be practiced in each and every part of our country. Thus, to improve cultivars and domestic livestock, we need to return to wild relatives of crop, plants, and animal. Thus, the preservation of biodiversity must also include traditionally used strains already in existence in crops and domestic animals. So, related to the topic, there are a few questions. Biodiversity is the degree of dash of the life form within a given species, ecosystem, biomass, and planet. So there are four options: understanding, interrelation, similarity, and variation. Second question is biodiversity, short of biological diversity, is the term used to describe the variety of life found on dash and all the natural processes. The options are Nepal, China, Earth, India. Next question is biodiversity includes ecosystem, genetic and cultural diversity, and the connections between these and all species. State whether this statement is true or false. Next question is the biotechnologist uses biorich areas to prospect and search for potential genetic properties in plants or animals that can be used to develop better varieties of crops. State that whether this statement is true or it is false. Next question is for the dash, biological diversity is the raw material from which new drugs can be identified from plants or animal products. Options are tailor, teacher, engineer, pharmacist. Next question is biodiversity provides a variety of environmental services from its species and ecosystems that are essential at global, regional, and local levels. So, state that whether it is true or false. Next question is loss of biodiversity contributes to climate change, disease, poverty, recession. Next question is forest converts CO2 into carbon and oxygen. Choose the correct option, whether it is true statement or false statement. Loss of forest covers due to release of carbon dioxide and other gases due to industrialization contributes to the greenhouse effect, pollination, desertification, or waterlogging. Next question is greenhouse leads to global warming, which results in rise in sea level submerging the low-lying areas in the world and causing dash changes. So options are atmospheric, economic, political, and social. So coming back to the point, threat to biodiversity or value to biodiversity, it is utmost important to understand the importance of biodiversity. Once we start valuing the biodiversity, after some time we are going to observe that there are less natural occurrence of natural calamities, less frequent weather extremes will be observed, overexploitation will be minimized of different natural resources, floods can be minimized, droughts can be minimized, as well as different components, living components will exist. There will be very less number of species at the border of extinction. Thus, it is very important to understand the different values. Either it is consumptive use value, aesthetical values, option values, consumptive use values. The option of triple R, reuse, reduce, recycle, are excellent options to understand or to conserve the resources, to minimize pollution, and several other things. As of now, we all are facing several natural extremes each and every year. We see the occurrence of calamities are increasing day by day. So it is a very critical time to start thinking about preservation of resources, minimization of natural calamities, minimizing overexploitation of several resources, organisms. So anything which we need, which is needed by human beings or an organism or a group of organism can be termed as a resource. Thus, only part of our natural environment such as land, water, air, minerals, forest, rangeland, wildlife, fish, or even human population that man can utilize to promote his welfare can be called as natural resource. So all the natural components which are present in the environment and that can be utilized, even the human population that can be utilized for doing some activities. So these all things combinedly, uh, which we can utilize for our welfare, can be called as natural resource. So, in the case of humans, a resource is any form of energy of matter essential for the fulfillment of physiological, socio-economical, and cultural needs, both at the individual level and that of the community. The sum of all physical, chemical, biological, and social factors which compose the surroundings of man is referred as environment, and each element of these surroundings constitutes a resource on which the man draws in order to develop a better life. So, these are the different factors which compose the surrounding of man, and combinedly it is referred as environment. And each components of the environment, or say like each component of the surroundings, they form a resource on which man relies for several activities, or to developing a better life. So talking about ecological variables, basically five ecological variables are there: energy, matter, space, time, and diversity. And these combinedly sometimes are called as natural resources. So, starting from solar energy, the available oil, fish resource, tree or forest resource, water resources, timber, which are obtained from forest resources, metals, animals, oxygen, fossil fuels, atmosphere, natural gas, various minerals, flowers, crops, plants, oceans, energy, different forms of energy, birds, coal, soil. This all can be examples of natural resources. These all are found in different at different locations, in different form of species, in different form of quantity, quality, etc., etc. So, moving to the next. From these slides, we can see the different, say, like different resources. Like from the first image, it is water resource. Um, from this resource, we get several food items. We get several outcomes or outputs which we consume. Similarly, from this water resource, the water we directly consume, the water we can use for generating energy, for recreational work, as well as several other advantages of or outcome of this resource, or products of this water resource we utilize, the human beings are utilizing, not only from now but from ancient time. So next one is wind energy. So by installation of windmill, we can harvest the energy which is generated from wind. And nowadays it is very commonly used in several countries at several places to consume, to harvest the wind energy, and you store that energy and to utilize whenever there is requirement of energy. So this is a kind of, say, like alternate energy source which does not require any fossil fuel, and this is a green energy source. Similarly, a solar resource, say like power of sun or solar harvesting, these can be utilized for generation of energy. Then mining, from this image we can see that mining is being done. So fossil fuel is extracted through the process of mining, and that fossil fuel is used to generate energy which is required by several industries, several machineries, etc. Then the last image is for drilling, for extraction of oil. So the oil is nowadays the, say like one of the majorly used fuel which is highly required nowadays. So these all different types of energy or source of energy are available in the environment near our surroundings, and from several years or from centuries, human beings are harvesting these all energies and they are utilizing for completing their activities, or in another word we can say they are utilizing these resources for developing their life in much better way. So the resources are limited and can be categorized in two parts. Either it is renewable or non-renewable resources. So renewable and non-renewable resources are categorization of resources. Under renewable resources, solar energy, air, wind, water, tides, flowing, soil, plants. Under non-renewable, fossil fuel, oil, coal, natural gas, metallic minerals, iron, copper, aluminium, and non-metallic minerals like salt, phosphates, etc. are uh, considered. So this is the classification of renewable and non-renewable. Um, Talking about classification of renewable and non-renewable energy sources, the classification depends on several factors. It depends on the aspect on which aspect we are classifying. If it is on the economic aspect, slight change will be there. Whereas when we consider the aspect of environment, there will be slightly change than the economic type of classification. But a commonly used classification of renewable and non-renewable is given on this slide. Few more images are given of renewable and non-renewable, like solar energy, water, wind energy are renewable resources. Once we harvest and utilize that energy, again it is available for harvesting and utilizing. Whereas under non-renewable resources such as phosphate, oil, limestone, once we extract it, say like limestone or phosphate or coal, once we extract it, that place is empty. It will be never reclaimed, or from the same place we can never uh, again go for mining or extraction of the same material. It is emptied now. So for that reason it is considered as non-renewable. Means once we utilize, it is not going to renew again. Similar cases for oil. If we are drilling and extracting oil from the wells, it is again never going to be renewed. That wells will never be refilled. Even though when in case of few oil wells which are say like renewed, the process is very 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 slow. So basically what happens in oil industry is they wherever the oil is suspected to be found, they drill it. If they find it, they extract whole crude oil, and they leave that well empty and they move to further place. So these all are the resources which can be considered as non-renewable resources. So basic differences is like renewable resources, it gets renewed again and again. We continuously for several times we can say like harvest it and we can utilize for several completing several activities or to develop our lifestyle or daily life. Whereas in case of non-renewable resources, once it is extracted or once it is harvested, it doesn't renew. So we will never get the same resource at same point or same place. So this is the basic difference between renewable and non-renewable resources. So there are further classification of natural resources. Classifications are based on several factors. The first one is on the basis of quantity. So on the basis of quantity, first one is inexhaustible, that is more in quantity, abundance in quantity. So it is unlimited or non-ending or unending type of material or resource. Both qualitative and quantitative degradation. Examples can be hydroelectric power, wave and tidal power, wind power, energy sources, water resources. So, say like wind power, then water resources, wave and tidal power, they are abundance in the quantity. It will never end. Something which will never end. Continuously, we can harvest energy from all those resources. Second one is exhaustible type. which is very less in quantity. Also, it is limited. Then quality may be degraded, not quantity. Like examples can be fossil fuel, natural gas, minerals, iron, copper, and aluminum. So once these type of natural resources are harvested or extracted, it is never going to be renewed. It is at the end or almost stopped. So due to this reason, it is considered under exhaustible type of natural resource classified on the basis of quantity. So coming to the next slide, that is second classification on the basis of mutability. So renewable and non-renewable resource are two classifications on the basis of mutability. The first one is renewable, that is perpetual harvest, say like human power, fertility of soil. It can be renewable. It can be refilled again. It can be replenished. It can be regenerated. Whereas non-renewable resource, there is no replacement, like a species of wildlife. Once it is ended, it will never come again. So this can be called as non-renewable resources. The last classification is based on continual utility. So there are three classifications: renewable, non-renewable, and cyclic resources. So these are different classifications of resources, natural resources. Basically, this classification is through the aspect of environment or environmental science. When we talk in different aspects, we are going to come across several more different type of classifications. So I suggest the students not to be confused. These classifications are basically based on what aspect we are talking about. Environmental aspect will have some different classification. Economic aspect will have some different classification. Furthermore, depending on the need, there will be several more different classifications you can find at different places. So that's it for today's lecture.